The check felt heavier than a slip of paper had any right to be. It was the 60th one he had written. 60 months, 5 years. Liam traced the elegant, printed name on the payee line. Chloe Sterling. The ink was a deep, definitive black. The numbers precise and unforgiving. $10,000. For a moment, he let his thumb rest on his own signature. A familiar scrawl that felt alien today, as if signed by a man he no longer knew. This check was meant to be the final one, a bookend to a long and painful chapter. It was intended to pay for the last round of an experimental treatment, a final, desperate hope for his late wife's dearest friend. But Liam knew, with a certainty that was as cold and hard as the granite countertop beneath his elbows, that it would pay for no such thing. He knew where the money was truly going. He knew the sickness was a phantom, the friendship a ghost, and the entire 5-year ordeal a meticulously crafted lie. Elena, his vibrant, brilliant Elena, had made him promise. Her voice, thinned by illness but still possessing its characteristic warmth, had echoed in the sterile quiet of the hospital room. "Take care of Chloe, Liam. She's not as strong as she looks. She'll need you." He had promised. He had held his wife's hand, felt the faint, fluttering pulse, and sworn he would honor her last wish. For 5 years he had. Now that promise felt like a chain he had willingly worn, only to discover the links were forged not of love, but of deceit. The man who wrote the first 59 checks did so out of grief and a profound sense of duty. The man holding this 60th check was someone else entirely. He was a man awakened. He was a man who had a plan. Within 24 hours, the world that Chloe Sterling had built on a foundation of his pain and his generosity would crumble into dust. She thought he was a ghost, a relic of a past she could manipulate. She had no idea he was the architect of her future. Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for this story. It's one that deals with some heavy emotions, and I bet a lot of us have felt betrayed or taken for granted at some point. Where are you all watching from today? Let me know in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoy what you hear, please consider giving this video a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps more than you know. Now, let's get back to Liam and the promise that was about to be broken, so that a truer one could be kept. The memory of the promise was as vivid as the scent of antiseptic that had clung to his clothes for weeks after Elena passed. She was propped against a mountain of pillows, her skin almost translucent. Chloe sat on the other side of the bed, her face a mask of perfectly performed sorrow, dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue. "Oh, Elena," Chloe had whispered, her voice a theatrical tremor. "Don't talk like that. You're going to beat this." Elena had offered a weak smile, her gaze shifting to Liam. "Promise me, Liam." Chloe has that rare autoimmune thing. It flares up under stress. With me gone, her breath hitched. The medical costs are staggering. I've always helped her. You have to continue. Liam, his own heart a cavity of raw grief, had simply nodded. What else could he do? He would have promised her the moon. He would have promised to single-handedly reverse the tides. Promising to care for her best friend was the easiest, most tangible thing he could do to honor the woman who was his entire world. And so it began. The first request from Chloe came a month after the funeral. It was delivered via a somber email filled with platitudes about Elena's beautiful spirit and a hesitant, almost apologetic mention of a bill for a specialist consultation. Liam paid it without a second thought. The next month it was for advanced diagnostic imaging. He paid that too. Soon it became a rhythm, a grim ritual at the start of every month. An email would arrive detailing a new procedure, a different medication, a necessary therapy. Each one was more expensive than the last. Each one came with a veneer of brave suffering. For the first few years, Liam existed in a fog. He went to his architectural firm. He moved through the motions of designing buildings that felt hollow and pointless. And he came home to an apartment that was deafeningly silent. Writing Chloe's check each month was a painful but necessary connection to Elena. It was his penance, his duty, his last active act of love for his wife. He never questioned it. He never asked for receipts. To do so would have felt like a betrayal of Elena's trust, a sullying of her memory. He was honoring his wife's dying wish, and that was all that mattered. The fog began to lift around year 4. The sharp edges of grief softened into a dull, persistent ache. He started noticing the world again. He saw the way the light hit the new skyscraper downtown. He tasted the coffee he drank in the morning. He heard the music playing in the grocery store. And with this returning clarity came a faint, unsettling sense of dissonance. Chloe's email still spoke of debilitating pain and financial ruin, but the few times he saw her in person, a different story seemed to be unfolding. He'd run into her at a high-end department store once. She was dressed in a chic trench coat he knew cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, a designer handbag slung over her arm. She saw him, and for a split second, a flicker of panic crossed her face before the mask of weary tragedy snapped back into place. "Liam!" "Oh, goodness, I had to get out of the house. The walls were closing in," she'd said, her hand fluttering to her chest. "Just picking up a few necessities." She gestured vaguely at the glittering jewelry counters surrounding them. The check he had written her that month had been for an emergency infusion therapy. He'd pushed the thought away, blaming his own cynicism. Grief was making him ugly, he told himself. The real crack in the facade appeared 6 weeks ago. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation or a shocking revelation. It was a simple, sterile piece of paper, a bank statement. His business manager had flagged an unusually large series of wire transfers from Chloe's account. It wasn't his business, of course, but the transfers were to a travel agency specializing in luxury South Pacific tours. The dates of the transfers corresponded exactly with the 2 months Chloe had claimed she was at a private, intensive treatment facility in Arizona, for which he had paid over $50,000. The statement lay on his desk like a coiled snake. It was circumstantial, yes, but it was enough. For the first time in 5 years, Liam allowed the seed of doubt, so long suppressed, to sprout. He looked at the photograph of Elena on his desk, her smile radiant, her eyes full of life. "Oh, Elena," he whispered, "what did you not see?" He didn't stop the payments. That would have been too easy, too clean. An abrupt halt would have alerted Chloe, put her on the defensive. No, the man who designed intricate, complex buildings knew that a proper demolition required careful planning. You didn't just knock a building down. You studied its structure, identified its weaknesses, and planned the sequence of charges to ensure it collapsed inward, exactly where you wanted it to. Chloe's world was a skyscraper of lies, and Liam was about to become an expert in demolition. He started with a quiet phone call. Not to Chloe, but to Elena's brother David. David was a blunt, no-nonsense investigative journalist who had never hidden his dislike for Chloe. "She was a parasite, Liam," David had said bluntly at the funeral. "Elena was just too kind to see it." At the time, Liam had been furious, dismissing it as bitterness. Now David's words echoed with the ring of prophecy. "David," Liam said, his voice steady, "I need a favor. I need you to recommend a private investigator, the best one you know, discreet, thorough, and unsparing." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then David's voice, low and serious. "It's about Chloe, isn't it?" "Yes," Liam said. "Finally," David breathed. "I'll make the call. You'll hear from him tomorrow. His name is Davies. Trust him." Mr. Davies was exactly as David had described, a quiet man in a rumpled suit with eyes that missed nothing. He listened without interruption as Liam laid out the story, the promise, the 5 years of payments, the bank statement. He showed Davies the emails, a meticulously saved folder containing 60 messages of escalating medical fiction. Davies reviewed them with a dispassionate air, his expression unreadable. "You have the transaction records for all the checks you've sent her?" Davies asked. Every single one, Liam confirmed. And you want to know if the illnesses are legitimate and where the money has gone? It wasn't a question. I want to know everything, Liam said, the words tasting like metal. I want to know the truth, whatever it is. Davies nodded slowly. The truth can be a heavy thing to carry, Mr. Vance. I'm an architect, Liam replied, a cold fire kindling in his chest. I spend my life making sure things can bear a weight. I can handle it. The first report from Davies arrived a week later in a plain manila envelope. Liam sat in his silent apartment, the city lights twinkling beyond his window, and read. It was worse than he had imagined. The rare autoimmune disorder was a fiction. Chloe had been diagnosed with a mild, manageable thyroid condition 10 years ago, easily controlled with an inexpensive daily pill. The renowned specialists she was seeing were names attached to P.O. boxes. The clinics didn't exist. The report detailed a life of breathtaking luxury. The money Liam sent on the first of each month was often spent within days. A $5,000 check for immunosuppressant medications had been used as a down payment on a new luxury sedan for her husband Mark. A $15,000 payment for a series of plasma exchanges had funded a 2-week ski trip to Aspen. The $50,000 for the Arizona clinic had, as Liam suspected, paid for a month-long holiday in Bali, complete with stays in 5-star resorts and private yacht excursions. The report included photographs. Chloe and her husband Mark laughing on a sun-drenched beach, raising champagne glasses. Chloe posing in front of a waterfall, looking radiant, healthy, and vibrant. The sight of her so full of life, a life purchased by his grief, made a cold, hard knot form in Liam's stomach. He didn't feel rage, not yet. That would come later. What he felt was a profound, hollow sense of violation. It was as if Chloe had not only stolen his money, but had also desecrated a holy place. She had taken his final, sacred promise to his dying wife and used it as her personal line of credit. She had danced on Elena's grave. He closed the folder and sat in the dark for a long time. The architect in him began to work. He saw the flawed structure, the compromised foundation, the load-bearing walls that were nothing but plaster and paint. He saw the demolition sequence. It would not be loud or explosive. It would be precise. It would be quiet. And it would be absolute. His next step was to arrange a meeting. He sent Chloe a simple text. Hi, Chloe. I hope you're feeling all right. Could we meet for coffee this week? I'd like to discuss the future of the payments. Her reply was almost instantaneous. Of course, Liam. I'm having a bit of a rough patch, but I can always make time for you. How about Thursday at the Gilded Bean? The Gilded Bean was a trendy, overpriced cafe she loved, a place to see and be seen. A rough patch. The irony was so thick he could taste it. When Thursday arrived, Liam dressed with care, not in a suit, but in the comfortable, well-worn clothes he favored on weekends. He wanted to look exactly as she expected him to. A little lost, a little sad, the grieving widower still adrift. He arrived first and chose a small table in the corner, a place that offered a clear view of the entrance. Chloe swept in 10 minutes late, a whirlwind of expensive perfume and feigned fragility. She wore a silk blouse, tailored trousers, and shoes that clicked with authority on the polished concrete floor. A pair of oversized designer sunglasses were perched on her head. For a woman in the midst of a rough patch, she looked remarkably well put together. Liam, darling, she cooed, sliding into the chair opposite him and placing a handbag on the table that probably cost more than the table itself. So good of you to suggest this. I've been so worried about you, cooped up in that little apartment. The condescension was a familiar needle prick. He'd ignored it for years. Today he cataloged it. Item 1. Belittling his home. I'm managing, he said, his voice deliberately mild. How are you? Your message said you were having a rough patch. Her face fell on cue, the bright smile melting into a carefully practiced expression of weary pain. Oh, it's just, This condition, it's relentless. The doctors want to try a new regimen of medications, but of course the insurance company is refusing to cover it. It's always a fight. She sighed dramatically, a martyr to the cruelties of the world. But I don't want to burden you with my problems. How are you, really? The question was a formality, a box to be ticked. She didn't care about the answer. He could see her eyes darting around the cafe, taking in the other patrons. I've been thinking a lot about Elena lately, he began, letting a genuine note of melancholy enter his voice. He wasn't faking it. The entire situation was steeped in the tragedy of her absence. And about my promise to her. Chloe's expression softened into one of deep sympathy. She reached across the table and patted his hand. Her skin was soft, her nails perfectly manicured. She loved you so much, Liam, and she loved me. She knew I'd be lost without her, without you. Her grip tightened slightly. You've been my angel. I don't know what I would have done. Item 2. The invocation of Elena's love as a tool of manipulation. The payments have been significant, he said, choosing his words carefully. My business manager has been asking some questions. The briefest flicker of alarm in her eyes again. There it was. He was on the right path. Oh, she said, withdrawing her hand. Well, I can provide all the documentation, of course. The bills are just astronomical. It's embarrassing, frankly. No, that's not necessary, he said quickly, holding up a hand. I trust you, Chloe. Elena trusted you. That's all that matters. In fact, I'm thinking of making things more permanent. Her confusion was genuine. More permanent? What do you mean? This was the first stone he would lay in his own trap. Well, these monthly payments are a hassle for both of us. You have to ask. I have to write a check. It feels transactional. I was thinking of setting up a formal trust, a larger lump sum that would generate enough income to cover your medical expenses for the foreseeable future. Indefinitely, perhaps. Her eyes widened. The feigned sickness and sorrow were momentarily forgotten, replaced by a raw, naked avarice that was startling in its intensity. He could almost see the numbers clicking away behind her pupils. A lump sum, a trust, indefinite income. It was the jackpot. Liam, I don't know what to say, she stammered, her voice thick with emotion. This time the emotion was real. It was pure, unadulterated greed. That's unbelievably generous. It would be life-changing. It would take away so much stress, which, as you know, is the biggest trigger for my condition. Item 3. The immediate linking of his generosity to her fictitious illness. Good, he said with a warm smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'm glad. There are details to work out, of course, lawyers, financial planners, but I wanted you to know that's the direction I'm heading. I want to honor Elena's wish in the most effective way possible. You are, she breathed, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy. You truly are the most wonderful man. Elena was so lucky to have you. The meeting ended soon after. Chloe was too excited to maintain the charade of her illness any longer. She practically floated out of the cafe, promising to be in touch and showering him with praise. Liam watched her go, the smile on his face slowly dissolving. He had laid the bait. He knew she would take it. The next report from Davies arrived 2 days later. It detailed the ownership of the lavish home Chloe shared with her husband, Mark. They had purchased it 3 years ago, putting down a 20% deposit of $200,000. Liam checked his records. In the 3 months leading up to the purchase, he had given Chloe a total of $190,000 for a series of emergency surgeries and a stay at a specialized recovery center in Germany. The report also contained a copy of Mark's credit card statements, obtained legally through a financial subpoena Davies's contacts had facilitated. They showed a life of fine dining, expensive hobbies, and season tickets to the opera. They were living like royalty, and Liam was the serf funding their kingdom. The anger, cold and quiet at first, was now beginning to burn. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the utter contempt they had for him and for Elena. They had seen his grief as a resource to be mined, his love for his wife as a weakness to be exploited. A week after their coffee meeting, Chloe called. Her voice was bright, energetic. "Liam, darling, I was just thinking about you. Mark and I are having a small dinner party on Saturday. Very intimate, just a few friends. We would be so honored if you would come. We haven't had a chance to properly thank you for, well, for everything." The invitation was a strategic move on her part. He knew it instantly. Having sold her on the idea of the trust, she now needed to draw him closer, to reinforce the illusion of their close, caring friendship. She wanted to show him the life he was funding, but framed as the brave struggle of a couple persevering against the odds. It was perfect. It was the next phase of his plan. "I'd be delighted, Chloe," he said. "Thank you for thinking of me." "Wonderful. 7 o'clock. And Liam, dress up a little. It's a celebration." A celebration. He had to give her credit. Her audacity was almost an art form. On Saturday evening, Liam stood before the impressive facade of their home. It was a modern masterpiece of glass and stone, nestled in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. A wave of nausea washed over him as he realized he had likely paid for the very stones beneath his feet. He took a deep breath, smoothed the lapels of his tailored jacket, and rang the bell. Mark opened the door. He was a handsome man, with a practiced smile and the easy confidence of someone who had never known a day of real hardship. "Liam, good to see you, man. Come on in." He clapped Liam on the shoulder, a gesture of false camaraderie that made Liam's skin crawl. The inside of the house was even more opulent than he'd imagined. Soaring ceilings, a floating staircase, walls adorned with large, abstract paintings that screamed of gallery prices. A grand piano stood in one corner. Through a wall of glass, he could see a shimmering infinity pool. The air smelled of expensive candles and gourmet cooking. Chloe drifted towards him, a vision in a flowing emerald green dress. "Liam, you came," she exclaimed, kissing the air on both sides of his face. "You look wonderful. Doesn't he look wonderful, Mark?" "Absolutely," Mark agreed, handing Liam a glass of champagne. "We're so glad you could make it. We know you don't get out much." Item 4. The subtle dig at his supposed isolation. "I'm trying to change that," Liam said smoothly, taking a sip of the champagne. It was an excellent vintage. He made a mental note to check the price later. He was introduced to the other guests, two other couples who radiated the same aura of casual wealth as Chloe and Mark. They were all effusive in their greetings, having clearly been briefed on the narrative. Liam, the tragic widower, the generous benefactor. He could feel their pity, a cloying, uncomfortable blanket. He accepted it with quiet dignity. Dinner was served at a long, polished mahogany table that could have seated 20. The conversation was light, revolving around travel, investments, and the latest society gossip. Liam remained mostly silent, a quiet observer at the Feast of the Jackals. At one point, one of the female guests, a woman named Fiona, turned to Chloe. "Chloe, darling, that trip to Bali you and Mark took looked absolutely divine," she gushed. "The photos you posted were breathtaking. I'm so glad you were feeling well enough to go." Liam's eyes flickered to Chloe. He saw the momentary flash of panic again, the same one he'd seen in the department store. Mark shot her a warning look. Chloe recovered instantly, placing a hand on her chest. "Oh, it wasn't a holiday, Fiona. Not really. It was a wellness retreat. My doctor insisted. Something about the warm climate and the holistic therapies. It was grueling, to be honest. All detox and meditation. But you have to do what you have to do to fight this thing." She gave a brave little shrug. Mark chimed in, his voice oozing sincerity. "She's a fighter. I don't know how she does it. The constant pain, the medical appointments, and yet she still manages to smile." He reached over and squeezed her hand, a perfect portrait of a supportive husband. Liam felt a visceral wave of disgust. He took a slow sip of his wine, the liquid turning to acid in his mouth. He looked at the faces around the table, the oblivious friends, the complicit husband, the master manipulator herself. They were all players in this grotesque theater. Later, as they were having dessert, a ridiculously complex chocolate lava cake with raspberry coulis, Mark steered the conversation. Liam, Chloe told me about your incredible idea for a trust. I have to say, man, I'm speechless. To take care of her like that, it's what Elena would have wanted. Item 5. The husband's active participation in the deception. I believe so, Liam said, his voice quiet. He looked directly at Chloe. Elena's memory is the most important thing to me. I want to build a legacy for her, something permanent, something good. Chloe's eyes glistened. And you are, Liam. You are. As he was leaving, Chloe walked him to the door. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch meant to be comforting. Thank you again for coming, Liam. And thank you for the future. You've given me hope. Real hope. You deserve to have hope, Chloe, he said. The words were a double-edged sword, but she only heard the side she wanted to hear. He drove home through the sleeping city. The opulent images of the evening burned into his mind. The expensive art, the fine wine, the infinity pool, Chloe's emerald dress. He had paid for all of it, every last thread. The anger was no longer a quiet burn. It was a white-hot flame, but he contained it. An architect knows that the most powerful forces are those that are controlled and directed. His plan was no longer just about exposing a lie. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming his wife's memory from the people who had so casually defiled it. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place 3 days later. It came in the form of a phone call from Chloe. Her voice, usually so carefully modulated, was tight with panic. Liam, I am so sorry to bother you. I just got a call from my doctor. The results of my latest tests are not good. The condition is progressing faster than we thought. Her voice broke with a sob that sounded utterly convincing, if you didn't know it was a performance. I'm so sorry to hear that, Chloe, he said, his own voice a calm, flat C. There's a new treatment, she rushed on, the words tumbling out. It's experimental, in Switzerland. It's my last real chance, Liam, but it's astronomical. They need a deposit of $100,000 just to secure a spot. She was openly weeping now. I don't know what to do. We're tapped out. The house, Mark's business. We poured everything into my health. $100,000. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of it almost made him laugh. After the life of luxury he had witnessed with his own eyes, she was claiming poverty. This was her endgame. She believed she had him primed with the promise of the trust, and now she was going for the big score. 100,000, he repeated, letting the number hang in the air. I know it's too much to ask, she cried. It's insane. Forget I said anything. We'll figure something out. We'll sell the house. We'll declare bankruptcy. I had to tell you. It was a masterful performance. The desperation, the pride, the final, hopeless plea. She was giving him every emotional cue to ride in like a white knight and save her. He let the silence stretch for a long moment. He could hear her ragged breathing on the other end of the line. Don't sell the house, Chloe, he said finally, his voice soft. Let me think about it. Let me see what I can do. Oh, Liam, she whispered, relief flooding her voice. Thank you, just thank you. He hung up the phone. The final charge was set. It was time to press the detonator. He didn't call his financial advisor. He didn't call a lawyer. Instead, he went to his drafting table. For the next 2 hours, he didn't design a building. He designed an invitation. He chose the paper himself, a heavy, cream-colored cardstock. He selected a simple, elegant font. The words were crafted with the same precision he would use for a blueprint. You are cordially invited to a dinner celebrating friendship, new beginnings, and the enduring spirit of Elena Vance. He set the date for 2 weeks away at a private dining room in Aperture, a new restaurant that had just opened to rave reviews. It was located in a building he had designed. He listed the hosts as himself, Chloe Sterling, and Mark Sterling. And at the bottom, in smaller print, he added a line. A special announcement will be made regarding the formation of the Elena Vance Foundation. He sent one invitation to Chloe and Mark. He sent 5 others to a different list of people. This list included the head of the city's largest philanthropic organization, a prominent journalist known for her tough exposés on fraud, the lawyer who had handled Elena's estate, his brother-in-law David, and the chairman of the board of his own architectural firm. Then, he sat down and wrote the 60th check, $10,000. He put it in an envelope. This was the check from the beginning of our story, the one that felt so heavy. He texted Chloe. Chloe, I've been thinking. The Switzerland thing is too big to decide quickly, but I want you to know I'm committed. Let's make this dinner a real celebration. I'll bring a check to tide you over, and we can discuss the larger amount then. I have a plan. Her reply was a string of heart emojis. The 2 weeks leading up to the dinner were a study in quiet preparation. Liam received the final, comprehensive report from Mr. Davies. It was a damning, irrefutable chronicle of 5 years of deception, complete with bank records, travel itineraries, and sworn affidavits from vendors who had been told the lavish purchases were for a sick friend. Davies had even found the interior designer who had worked on their house. Chloe had told her the budget was a recent inheritance from a dear departed friend. The cruelty was bottomless. Liam had the report bound in a simple, professional-looking black folder. He made 7 copies. He also met with his lawyers and financial planners. The trust he had described to Chloe was indeed being created. But it wasn't for her. He was seeding the Elena Vance Foundation with an initial endowment of $2 million. Its mission would be to provide funding for community arts programs and support for families dealing with long-term illness, real families with real needs. The board was already being formed. Several of them would be at the dinner. The night of the dinner, Liam arrived at Aperture an hour early. The private dining room was beautiful, with one wall of glass overlooking the glittering cityscape. It was a view he had personally designed, a perspective he had crafted. Tonight, it felt like his home turf. He checked the table setting, the lighting, the placement of the chairs. He spoke quietly with the manager, ensuring the staff understood the evening's particular requirements. There would be no interruptions once the main course was cleared. He sat at the head of the table, the seat he had designated for himself, and waited. He felt strangely calm. The white-hot anger had cooled into something harder, more focused. It was the calm of an architect reviewing his final plans just before the groundbreaking, confident in every line, every measurement, every joint. The other guests, the real guests, arrived first. The journalist, the philanthropist, the lawyer, his chairman, and David. He greeted each of them warmly, thanking them for coming. They were his allies, his witnesses. They knew the broad strokes of the situation, but not the granular, ugly details they were about to hear. David gave his shoulder a firm squeeze. "You ready for this?" he asked quietly. Liam just nodded. Finally, Chloe and Mark arrived. They were radiant. Chloe was in a stunning silver sequin dress, Mark in a perfectly tailored dark suit. They were the picture of success and glamour. Their confidence was absolute. They thought this was their coronation. "Liam!" Chloe exclaimed, gliding over to him. "This place is incredible. And to have you host this for us, it's too much." She saw the other guests and her smile tighten for a fraction of a second. She didn't know them. "Chloe, Mark," Liam said, his voice smooth and welcoming. "I'm so glad you could make it. I'd like you to meet some people who are going to be instrumental in the next chapter." He introduced them around the table. He used their professional titles, Ms. Albright, the journalist, Mr. Chen, the philanthropist. Chloe and Mark, to their credit, adapted quickly, shaking hands and making charming small talk, assuming these were the powerful people Liam had engaged to set up their lucrative trust. Their smiles were dazzling. They all sat down. Liam was at one end of the table. He had placed Chloe and Mark in the middle, on opposite sides, like specimens under a microscope. The first part of the evening was a masterpiece of dramatic irony. The food was exquisite. The wine flowed freely. Chloe and Mark held court, talking about their love for Elena, their struggles, their hopes for the future. Chloe, emboldened by the champagne and the sense of impending victory, was particularly effusive. Elena was just the most generous soul, she said to Mr. Chen, who was seated beside her. She always wanted to help people. It's a spirit Liam has carried on so beautifully. Mr. Chen, a stern-faced man who ran a foundation that vetted every penny, simply nodded, his eyes giving nothing away. Generosity is a rare and precious thing, he said, his voice neutral. Mark, meanwhile, was talking to the chairman of Liam's firm. Liam is a genius, of course. We're so proud of him. He's been through so much, but he has a heart of gold. Taking care of Chloe the way he has, it's a testament to his character. Liam let them talk. He let them dig their own graves with silver spoons. He watched as they charmed and deceived the very people who would soon bear witness to their downfall. He felt a detached, almost clinical pity for them. They were so blinded by their own greed, they couldn't see the perfectly constructed trap they had walked into. Finally, the main courses were cleared. The waiters refilled water glasses and then, on a signal from Liam, retreated, closing the heavy oak doors behind them. The room grew quiet. The city lights outside seemed to brighten. It was time. Liam stood up, holding a glass of champagne. He looked around the table, his gaze lingering for a moment on each person before finally settling on Chloe and Mark. "I want to thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice filling the silent room. "I invited you here to celebrate two things, friendship and new beginnings, and to honor the memory of my wife, Elena." He raised his glass. "To Elena." "To Elena," the table echoed. Chloe's eyes were shining. Liam remained standing. He placed his glass down. "As some of you know, for the past 5 years, I have been honoring a promise I made to Elena on her deathbed. A promise to take care of her best friend Chloe, who she believed was suffering from a debilitating and expensive medical condition." He paused, letting the words settle. He looked directly at Chloe. Her smile was beatific. "Over those 5 years," he continued, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more intense, "I have given Chloe a total of $980,000. A quiet gasp came from Ms. Albright, the journalist. Mr. Chen's stony expression tightened. Chloe and Mark exchanged a quick, triumphant glance. They thought this was the preamble to the big announcement, the proof of his largesse. This money was for specialists, for treatments, for medications, for hospital stays. It was to alleviate suffering and to provide hope. Liam's voice was cold now, sharp as shattered glass. But that is not what the money was used for. Chloe's smile froze on her face. Mark's confident posture stiffened. The atmosphere in the room changed in a heartbeat. The warm, celebratory air became frigid. "I'm not sure I understand, Liam," Chloe said, her voice a little shaky. Liam ignored her. He reached down and picked up one of the black folders. He held it up. "This is a report from a private investigator. It details, with receipts and photographs, exactly where that $980,000 went." He opened the folder. "It went to a $200,000 down payment on a house. It went to a luxury sedan for Mark. It went to a ski trip in Aspen. It went to a month-long holiday in Bali, which was described to me as a grueling wellness retreat." He looked at Chloe, his eyes boring into hers. Her face had gone chalk white, the color drained from Mark's. "It went to designer clothes, to fine dining, to opera tickets, to a life of incredible luxury, all funded by my grief. All built on a lie told to a dying woman." "Liam, this is a misunderstanding," Mark blustered, finding his voice. Chloe is sick. We can show you the bills. Can you? Liam asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Because this report also contains a statement from your actual doctor, Chloe, confirming that you have a common, manageable thyroid condition that costs about $30 a month to treat. It confirms that the rare autoimmune disorder is a complete fabrication. It confirms that you have not seen a specialist for anything other than a routine checkup in over a decade. The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside. Chloe was staring at him, her mouth slightly open, her eyes wide with sheer horror. She looked like she had been struck by lightning. But that's not the worst part, Liam continued, his voice relentless. The worst part is not the theft. It's the sacrilege. It's the casual, cruel, and constant desecration of my wife's memory. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the table. You, Chloe, told your interior designer that the money for your renovations came from an inheritance from a dear departed friend. You took the love Elena had for you and you twisted it into a punchline. A choked sob escaped Chloe's lips. It was a real one this time, a sound of pure, unadulterated panic. Now, just a few days ago, Liam pressed on, you called me. You told me you needed $100,000 for an experimental treatment in Switzerland. Your last chance. You were ready to cash out, to take one last big score from the grieving fool you thought I was. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the envelope containing the 60th check. He slid it across the polished table. It stopped directly in front of Chloe. This is the $10,000 I promised you, to tide you over, he said. You can have it, but there will be no trust. There will be no $100,000. There will be nothing more. Chloe stared at the envelope as if it were a venomous snake. Mark looked around the table, his eyes pleading, searching for an ally. He found none. He saw only the cold, judgmental faces of the journalist, the philanthropist, the lawyer. He saw David, Elena's brother, whose expression was one of pure, righteous fury. And now, Liam said, his voice ringing with authority, we come to the new beginning. He gestured to the people around the table. These are the board members of the newly formed Elena Vance Foundation, a foundation I have endowed with $2 million. Its purpose is to do what I thought I was doing all along, to actually help people in need, to provide real hope, to build a true legacy of generosity and compassion in my wife's name. He looked at Chloe and Mark. Your performance tonight was very convincing. You spoke so movingly of Elena's spirit, so I'm going to give you a chance to truly honor it. He slid the other folders across the table to the board members. This report contains all the evidence of the fraud. I have already spoken with the district attorney's office. They are very interested in cases of elder fraud, and they have assured me that fraud perpetrated on a grieving spouse is viewed with equal severity. Mark shot to his feet. You can't do this. Sit down, Liam commanded, and to his own surprise, Mark sank back into his chair. The power dynamic in the room had been irrevocably altered. You have two options, Liam said calmly. Option one, I hand this evidence over to Ms. Albright for her newspaper, and my lawyer, Mr. Harris here, files a criminal complaint tomorrow morning. You will be arrested. You will be prosecuted. You will lose everything. Your house, your assets, your reputations. You will go to prison. He let that sink in. Chloe was openly weeping now, her face buried in her hands, her silver dress seeming to mock her. Or, Liam continued, option two, you will sign a legally binding confession drafted by Mr. Harris. You will agree to a repayment plan. You will liquidate your assets, the house, the cars, the art, and you will repay every single cent of the $980,000, not to me, to the Elena Vance Foundation. And then you will disappear. You will leave the city and you will never, ever use my name or my wife's name again. He stood straight, a judge delivering a sentence. You have 60 seconds to decide. Your new beginning starts now. The silence that followed was the heaviest thing Liam had ever felt. It was the weight of 5 years of lies collapsing in on themselves. Chloe's shoulders shook with sobs. Mark stared at Liam, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, but also, beneath it all, terror. He looked at the faces of the board members, saw the implacable judgment in their eyes, and knew there was no escape. The beautiful, intricate trap had sprung, and they were caught. "We'll do it," Mark croaked, his voice hoarse. "Option 2, we'll do it." Chloe didn't look up. She just nodded her head, her body trembling. Liam gave a curt nod to his lawyer. Mr. Harris, a man of quiet efficiency, produced a set of documents from his briefcase and placed them in front of Mark. A pen was laid beside them. "Sign," Liam said. His voice was not triumphant. It was merely final. As Mark picked up the pen, his hands shaking, Liam turned and looked out the window at the city he had helped to build. He felt no joy, no satisfaction in their ruin. He only felt a vast, empty quiet. The fire of his anger had burned itself out, leaving behind only the cold ashes of the truth. He had honored his promise to Elena after all. Not the one she had asked him to make in her final, clouded moments, but the deeper, unspoken promise every loving partner makes. The promise to protect her, to honor her, to ensure her light was not extinguished by the darkness of the world. He had exposed the rot, and now something new and clean could be built in its place. The foundation. That was her real legacy. That was his final act of love. The days and weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings. Chloe and Mark were as good as their word, terrified into compliance. Their beautiful house was put on the market, its contents auctioned off. The luxury cars were sold. Bit by bit, the money started to flow into the coffers of the Elena Vance Foundation, a stream of restitution cleansing a dirty wound. They disappeared from the city's social scene overnight, their names spoken only in hushed, cautionary whispers. Liam never saw them again. He never wanted to. 6 months later, Liam stood on a muddy plot of land in a neglected part of the city. The air was crisp with the promise of autumn. Beside him, David held a rolled-up set of blueprints. In front of them, a small crowd had gathered, community leaders, future board members of the foundation, and residents of the neighborhood. A banner fluttered in the breeze, future home of the Elena Vance Community Arts Center. This was the foundation's first project. It was a building Liam had designed himself. It wasn't a skyscraper or a luxury condo. It was a low, welcoming structure of warm wood and natural light, designed to house dance studios, art classes, a small theater, and a library. It was a place for creation, for community, for hope. Mr. Chen, the philanthropist from that fateful dinner, stepped up to a small podium. He spoke about the scourge of fraud and the power of redemption, not for the perpetrators, but for the victims who choose to turn their pain into a positive force. He spoke of Elena, a woman he'd never met, but whose spirit he felt in the very purpose of the building. Then he invited Liam to speak. Liam walked to the podium. He looked out at the expectant faces. He didn't have a prepared speech. "My wife, Elena, believed in beauty," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "She believed it wasn't a luxury, but a necessity. She believed it could be found everywhere, in a painting, in a piece of music, in a perfectly designed building. But most of all, she believed it was found in people, in their kindness, their resilience, and their ability to create." He gestured to the muddy ground around them. "This place will be a testament to that belief. It will be a place where that beauty can flourish. It is her true legacy. Thank you." He stepped down. There was applause, but Liam barely heard it. He was looking at the architectural rendering of the finished building, propped on an easel. It was full of light. It was full of life. It was everything he had wanted to say. Later, as the crowd mingled, David came and stood beside him. "She would have been proud, Liam," he said softly. "Not just of this, but of you. You found your way back." Liam nodded, a lump forming in his throat. I just wish she'd never had to be protected from her own kindness. Kindness isn't a weakness, Liam, David said, looking at the rendering. It's a light. Some people are just drawn to the light so they can cast their own shadow. You just chase the shadows away. Liam looked up at the sky, a brilliant, cloudless blue. For the first time in 5 years, the weight was gone. The check, the promise, the lie, it had all been demolished, and on the cleared ground he was finally building something that would last. He had learned that true worth isn't measured by what you have, but by what you build, and that the most enduring structures are not made of glass and steel, but of truth, integrity, and love. The pain of Elena's loss would never fully disappear, but it was no longer a hollow void. It was a foundation, and on it he would spend the rest of his life building things of beauty in her name. So, what do you all think? Was Liam's response justified, or was it too harsh? It's a complicated question, and I'm really interested to hear your take on it in the comments. The line between justice and revenge can sometimes be blurry. Thank you for staying with me through this entire story. If it resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more content just like this. Your support means the world and allows me to keep sharing these narratives. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the people you trust.